Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive with Dr. Rebecca Risk. Do you ever feel that even though nothing seems seriously wrong and you pass all the medical tests, that you still feel that your health, pain, and fatigue are completely out of control? It doesn't have to be that way. Listen to the tips and suggestions given on our program today and take back control of your health. Now, here is Dr. Rebecca Risk.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, we're welcoming Ilana Jacqueline. She is a professional health journalist. She is a health journalist and professional patient advocate whose work has included writing for publications like Cosmopolitan and the Huffington Post. Today, we're discussing her book, Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness, How to Stay Sane and Live One Step Ahead of Your Symptoms. So, Ilana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can you tell me what inspired you to get involved in all of this?
Of course. So there are a lot of great books out there about different protocols and diets and, medical and alternative advice and on how to treat your disease, but not a lot of this advice applies to all patients. For many, chronic illness will be a lifelong battle. And their journey to answers can be a long time coming. In the meantime, they've got school and work and relationships, and they've got to live with and around and in the thick of chronic illness, which is something I have a lot of personal experience in. So there was no real guide to dealing with a lot of the social and emotional repercussions to a chronic invisible disease. So I took what I learned from my personal journey, from experts and the journeys of other patients, and really wanted to craft kind of an all-encompassing guide, not just to surviving a disease, but to achieving real quality of life despite it.
So can you just tell us a little bit about what your journey looked like?
Sure. So I've had a chronic illness since day one. I dealt with gastrointestinal issues, chronic infections, chronic pain, migraines. When I was 19, I was diagnosed with a rare disease called primary immune deficiency disease. When I was 22, I was diagnosed with an autonomic nervous system disorder called dysautonomia. It's also known as postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. But I dealt with many issues outside of those diagnostic bubbles. And like many patients, my disease in its entirety kind of remains a bit of a medical mystery. So trying to work my life around this unanswered question about my health was really a challenge. And I learned mostly by great humiliation and heartbreak the right and wrong way to cope with my disease. And I learned about the way it affected, not just me, but all of the people around me in my life. So everything from friendships, family, my self-esteem, school, work, career, dating, sex, marriage. My story, it isn't just about being a patient with a complex disease. It's really about trying to be a whole person in spite of it.
So, I love that you're making this a topic of conversation, which, I have definitely tried to do. One of my first shows was a couple who were going through a chronic illness and how it affected them. And I think that that's something that we don't think about, especially if you're on the outside and you're a friend or a family member. I mean, you talk about this. Some people don't understand, because especially when it is an invisible chronic illness, why aren't you over it yet? Why is it still an issue? Which I can definitely relate to, with my journey through Lyme disease. People thought it should be over in 2 weeks. And our journeys were very similar, where it wasn't. And it put a strain on every relationship that I had and every part of my life, my work, my, just my enjoyment of everything, because I had to limit everything. And, you do have to change how you do things. And I know with conversations with my patients, one thing that they wish for is to be the way they were. Not everybody grew up the whole time with the illness the way you are, but they want to be like everybody else. They want to be able to do those things, and they really can't.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of patients kind of just want to go back to the way they were. That sometimes they wake up and they just are not the same person anymore. And it progresses over time. It's very difficult.
So, invisible chronic illness, can you just tell us what that is and what that means for the patient?
Of course. So an invisible chronic illness, it's really a very broad term. It really classifies a type of disease that I guess doesn't always have an immediate visible cue every single day at every moment. And that's kind of key too, because some people think, well, if you can see the disease at some point, that it's visible. But, when I was originally showing this book to different publishers and, they thought, well, an invisible chronic illness, that's a really small pool of people. They were thinking of patients with diseases like, maybe like Crohn's disease or rare diseases like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and thinking, well, that's just very few people, but they couldn't be more wrong. Diabetes is an invisible disease. Most cancers are invisible diseases. Even patients who use assistive devices like wheelchairs, canes, walkers, or have, pumps or ports or tubes, they often hide them or they don't always use them on a daily basis. And, these all qualify as an invisible disease.
Well, and I think we could put mental health in that category as well.
Absolutely.
It has a lot of stigma, the way invisible illnesses do as well. Why are you good this day and not that day, or that kind of thing, which is something I think everybody has experienced when they have an illness.
And, it's a matter, too, of patients with these chronic illnesses become so adept at hiding them. I mean, it's just second nature to them at some point where they don't want to show these things. So, even if they have, truly obvious symptoms, they've become very good at hiding them. And while in some areas of their life that kind of improves things for them socially, makes things easier, it also makes it a real struggle when they are confronted about their illness and, why they haven't, shown, more obvious symptoms.
Well, and it seems like it's a catch-22. I mean, I definitely hid my illness. People didn't understand how fatigued I was, how much pain I was in, and I had a movement disorder that I got very good at covering up. But, I think, if you don't hide them and they're obvious or you talk about them, there's some stigma around that as well that people experience.
Absolutely. It's just there's kind of no wonderful way to go about it. People don't want to discuss it too much because they don't want to, be in situations where they're going to be judged for being too open about it, and they don't want to hide it because they don't want to be in situations where they're going to have a bad day, a symptom is going to be obvious, and no one is going to believe that this is a real thing.
Well, and I think most people have been through, if they talk about it, they're kind of labeled as trying to get attention. But then if they don't talk about it, people don't understand why they're limited or saying no to certain things or that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So in your book, you talk about accepting the illness, which, it's something I talk about with my patients, but people don't talk about very much. And I think that that's really important that you put that in there. Can you just explain what that means?
Sure. Acceptance of your disease is something I did really want to focus on in the book, just to start out. I really stress it in the book because I feel like there's a deep miscommunication with that word for most patients, acceptance. To them, acceptance might mean accepting the fact that your life is over, accepting the fact that you're going to die from this or you're just going to suffer every day. Acceptance might mean to them, to stop trying to live a better life, to accept this like inevitable, lifelong unhappiness, and they couldn't be more wrong. Accepting your disease isn't giving up. It's saying, this is real. This is a thing that exists, that is standing in front of me. And the longer that I ignore it and demonize it and let it walk around me like a shadow, the less that I accept control over it. You can't outsmart something you can't even introduce yourself to. So, one of the things that I stress is that acceptance isn't defeat. It's a declaration of self-respect under irrefutable circumstances. So, this is where you are, and you're going to make the best out of every moment of it.
Well, and I think a lot of people do think that acceptance would be that defeat of, oh, I'm never going to be able to do anything again. But what I've found in my own journey and watching other people is when I accepted that I had limitations, I was able to give my body the time to heal that it needed. I understood those limitations, and my life changed because of it. Eventually I did get better, but I still keep some rules in my life. I won't work more than a certain hours in a day because I don't want to burn out, and I know I have limitations. And there are some things that I just decide that I'm not going to do, and I don't feel left out because of them. I still keep a healthy diet, and those are things I choose because I don't want to go back to the way I was. I went through a journey, and that was part of my acceptance that this is something that I need to continue to do as well, so that I maintain my health.
It's great because what that is compassion. Acceptance means giving yourself compassion to say, like, this is happening and I'm allowed to react to this. And in reacting to this, I can be aware of it, and I can set better limitations and guidelines for myself, that I can have better control over it. But that can't be done until you accept that it's there, and then you start reacting within it.
And I love that you use the word compassion, which is something we don't have for ourselves very often. I think the person we're hardest on the most is ourselves. And, if you can't go to the gym anymore, or you can't contribute to your family the way you used to, you are going to be hard on yourself. And it's very hard to look at, it is okay to be sick right now. This is what I need to do to get better.
Yes. And I talked a lot about kind of like my own shame spiral when I first started really understanding that I was sick and that my disease was going to affect everything. I mean, it was going to affect my body. Shame. So when you talk about exercising and going to the gym, and patients go on all of this medication that, most of the time they don't really have a choice about. I spoke with a lot of patients who have different kind of irritable bowel diseases, and we always got into the topic of prednisone, and just how horrible of an experience and a universal experience that is for all IBS and IBD patients. With that, it just changes your body overnight, and you feel terrible about yourself. You get, moon face, where your face swells up and you gain weight so quickly, which was something that I experienced when I was on it as well, that I wrote about. And, it's such a hard thing to cope with, and to try to figure out a way to say to yourself, well, this is not normal for everyone that this would happen, but this is part of my normal now. And I've got to find a way to continue trying to be healthy, but also be accepting of what is happening and what I can and can't change. It's just compassion and shame are such a prevalent issue within, the chronic illness experience.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's shame if you're fatigued and you can't participate. That most chronic illnesses, you'll have fatigue or pain and you're not doing your life the same way. But there's also some of the shame with the symptoms of the illness. An example would be mental health, or if your mental health is affected just because you are sick and you're feeling depression and anxiety, and then you have a shame because you're feeling that way, and you go in this spiral over and over, and it's very difficult to get yourself out of that.
It really is. It really is.
Is there anything that people can do to kind of recognize these things and then maybe start to step forward through it?
Sure. Yeah. The first thing is to really understand that, if you're going through this, if you're experiencing shame about, how your disease has affected your body, your life, your relationships, first understand that you are completely and totally not alone in it. You are not the first person to experience body issues or to experience feelings of inadequacy, to be called a hypochondriac or be told you have Munchausen's by proxy, or, shame, it's such a universal experience, and it's so rampant in the patient community. And we feel shamed by everyone, by our doctors, by our friends and families, by our coworkers when we can't make it to work, and our employers. But day after day, our biggest keeper of shame is ourselves. And conquering shame, it starts by coping with the realities of our disease, by, again, having compassion for our own experience and remembering, even in the moments of our worst, most frustrating symptoms, that we are so much more than just a person with a chronic illness. We are, so much more complex than our complex diseases.
I definitely agree with that. We are not our illness. It is part of who we are, and it's actually developing who we are as well. We all have challenges, and I think, with these things, we can be made stronger, if we choose to, and we can come out from them, a better, more mature, stronger person.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Ilana Jacqueline. We're discussing her book, Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness, and we'll be back shortly.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
The largest syndicated alternative health talk program has come to the Voice America Network. The Dr. Bob Martin Show is the program that will answer your health questions and help you to heal your own body of many different ailments. Each week, you'll hear the answers that Dr. Bob gives to his callers that help them to be their own doctor most of the time. We'll also discuss developments on the healthcare front and what you need to do to keep your body in top form. The Dr. Bob Martin Show airs Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
The Voice America Live Events channel is here now to showcase your corporate, individual, or organization's live event. Visit voiceamerica.com/live events to see all of our past live events and find out more. Whether it's a multi-day conference, special speaker, or single-day event, we've got everything to make your event a success. We can do a few hours or a few days. For more information about taking your event to the next level, call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or email info@voiceamerica.com. Again, that's Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or send us an email to info@voiceamerica.com. Voice America is where you are and where you want to be. Join us around the globe as we broadcast live from some of the most interesting events available. Don't forget to view all our live events, including on-demand access to past events that you may have missed by visiting voiceamerica.com/live events.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Ilana Jacqueline. She's the author of the book, Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness. So, Ilana, before the break, in the first segment, we touched on relationships a little bit. And I think this is something people don't always think about when they have a chronic illness or someone around them does, and how that's affecting everything else. So maybe you can just tell us first how that affected your relationships.
Sure. So I had experiences very similar to, I think, what many other chronic illness patients, really a lot of undiagnosed patients go through, which is kind of the fallout of support, which is, you might have an acute illness that turns into a long-term illness that you think is one diagnosis, but then is another. And when you don't have that really clear picture of what's going on, it's really difficult to explain that to other people. And so I had that experience where, I had a few people in my life who were very close to me and were going through the journey with me, and understood how confusing it was and scary it was. And then I had other people in my life who, weren't that close to me and were kind of judging from afar and didn't quite understand what was happening. And it's very hard to kind of communicate what's going on and to maintain those relationships when there's a lot of fear and judgment. And so for me, I had a lot of difficulty with some extended family that were just not supportive. But it made some of my other relationships much stronger. And my mother is such a wonderful advocate for me. She actually, after I got sick and was diagnosed with the primary immune deficiency disease, it took 19 years for me to get diagnosed with that. And it's a genetic disease. It's something that you're born with. And it was very confusing to us that had happened, that had kind of slipped through the cracks for so long. And she ended up taking my story and our story and developing a show called Behind the Mystery, Rare and Genetic, which is a show on Lifetime TV's morning talk show, and where she does education about rare diseases. So she was such a great advocate for me. She was such a great supporter and a rock for me. And I was, I'm married now. I'm 27. And my husband also went through this journey with me, and he was a wonderful supporter. So, I've been very fortunate to have a few people in my life who have just been excellent in being there for me and going through this journey with me. But I think that some of the experience that I had with other family, with trying to maintain friendships, that all went into the book as well. And it's something I wanted to be very open about and share my difficulties and my heartbreak, because I know from so many people and so many other patients how hard that is to be in a situation where you have people who should mean the world to you in terms of support and who should be there for you, and you don't quite understand why aren't they?
Well, and that is difficult. I mean, in my journey, I didn't talk about it a lot. I thought by telling people once, I'm sick and this is going on, that they understood. But then I realized, a year in, because it took me 3 years to get better, that they didn't know what was going on. And I thought that they understood. But it was also, I think I was too sick to realize I wasn't communicating. But, it was a lack of communication on my part to say, hey, this is going on, I need support, or can you just be okay with the fact that I can't make it when we make plans and that kind of thing. And I had to have that conversation. I mean, they didn't know, they didn't understand. So it was on me. And it's hard to have that conversation when you're trying to hide it. I mean, I was working part-time, which is all I could do. And I had to hide that I didn't feel good when I was there. So I just would go home and then, crash. And I think a lot of people are used to hiding it. So it's difficult to come out and say, hey, I need this and this is going on.
Right. I mean, you have to kind of figure out, well, not only how should I tell people, but who should I tell? You have to figure out who do you want to share that story with. You don't have to share it with everyone. It's not required of you. You and you alone are the decision maker on who gets to be invited to this extremely personal conversation. And my book goes over that list of criteria on, who should get to be those people in your life who get the full story and who gets the partial story and who gets a letter once a year saying, I'm doing just fine, but how are you? There's a variety of ways in which you can communicate your story. And, I have some different advice for what you might do in a sit-down conversation, what you would do at family dinners, because that is the absolute worst when you're trying to catch up with relatives. And and you just don't know what to say in a room full of people, and what you might say one-on-one. There's definitely so much different etiquette that nobody ever really discusses on how to do this. So that's something I really wanted to go over in detail in the book and give real verbal, what exactly do I say kind of advice for patients going through that.
Well, and I think that's important. I get asked that question all the time by my patients, and a lot of them choose not to tell people. They don't want people to know, and on some level, I think that's a mistake as well, because that's not accepting that there's something going on. If you're hiding it, and you don't want to tell your in-laws, and you don't want people to know that you need help, cleaning around the house and that kind of thing. That's a shame. That's what we spoke about earlier, as being ashamed that you are going through something and you're vulnerable, which is something that everybody's going to experience at some point in their lives. And it's important, but also at the same time, I think it's important to be aware of who you're talking to, because, sometimes it can feel a little bit dangerous to tell something so vulnerable to someone.
Right. And it's funny that you say that too, because, deciding who to tell is one thing, but you kind of also have to be clear with the people that you tell who they can tell. I can tell you that I had this situation with my husband. Obviously he knew everything that was going on, and he knew that there were some people in my life that, I didn't want to know everything that was happening. This was back when I had my own consulting PR business, and obviously my clients were not getting the full story on what was happening with me every day. And I think he misinterpreted that as he couldn't tell other people what was going on, like people within our family. And I caught him one day talking to my mother-in-law and giving her like a half-truth. And I was like, what are you doing? She kind of needs to know if I'm in the hospital or not. Like, that's kind of a key person in our lives there. We don't want to leave her out of the equation. And he was like, well, I just didn't know what your parameters were. So, you have to kind of make that list and be clear with the people in your life, who you want to go to support, and, they need support too. So you have to kind of, think about that as well, that the people that you discuss your disease with and who are going to be, your support pillars, they also need support pillars. So, just another thing to think about.
So how can we know if somebody that we're talking to is somebody that we can trust with that information? Or is that something that we just kind of figure out as we go?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of your own judgment, and it's a little bit of a need-to-know basis. And it's something that people figure out along the way. I in the book, I talk about, like I said, those relatives that, you hear from once a year really don't, especially if you feel like they're not going to understand, or they're not going to be accepting of what's going on. You don't need to go there with them. You're not required to do that, but you should definitely take into consideration the people that you interact with every single day. So I'm talking about absolutely nuclear family, but also coworkers and employers and friends, and there are different levels of how much you want to communicate, and to who in those groups of people you want to communicate. There's definitely a different way of communicating with friends and family than there is in a work situation. And so one of the things that I developed a little bit was, I don't know if you've ever heard of an elevator pitch.
Yes.
Yeah. So for people who haven't heard of that before, an elevator pitch it's basically just a quick prepared speech used to communicate a business idea or a professional introduction to someone of importance in a short amount of time, say during the amount of time you might be in an elevator together. So a lot of patients get really tongue-tied when it comes to someone saying, so like, what's wrong with you? And they try to figure out, how do I even put that into words? There's so much wrong with me. So I try to teach patients how to develop their own story into this short elevator pitch, that does a couple of things. It keeps things light but informative, and it gives the other person an easy way to respond and interact with what you've just communicated. So there isn't this awkward moment where they feel like they're expected to, feel sorry for you or commiserate, but gives them a way to interact.
Well, just as we're talking about this, I'm thinking of my own journey, and I was very private about it. No one believes me because I do this show, but I'm actually quite shy, and I don't like talking about personal things. So I actually didn't for a long time. And then I had a patient ask me to do a talk on Lyme disease for a group of family and friends to bring awareness to what her family was going through. And I took that as an opportunity to record it and share it. And my journey was on there. This is my video that's on YouTube. And I could tell you I hated doing it. But and it was so personal. And when I put that out there, not only was that there for people that knew me to understand, but people related to it and thanked me for sharing my story. And I think one thing that's important is if we are ashamed and hiding, then the awareness isn't ever going to come to what chronic illnesses look like, and nobody is going to understand. But if we talk about it more the way you and I are, because I think yours started with your blog, I think when you were sharing your story and you had the same response I did, is that people need to hear that, whether they're going through it or they're trying to understand someone going through it. The only way to understand is for everybody to share and to bring that awareness and say, this is what my life is like and what I'm going through.
It's so important to do that. I mean, and yes, I had started my blog in 2012, and that was really the goal, was that, I needed to communicate what was happening to people who couldn't, I was looking originally to educate the people that were in my life, and then, of course, the responses from people who I had no idea who they were, but could absolutely relate to what was happening. And it's so wonderful that, that you shared your story, that you continue to share your story, because we need that. We need patients to be outspoken about what's happening to them, because that stigma will persist if we don't. I actually just joined the board for IDA, which is the Invisible Disability Association, and they are working on a campaign right now that's actually asking people to submit videos sharing their invisible disability stories to help spread awareness and, encourage and educate patients and their families. So if anyone is out there who is looking to share their story or looking for a forum to do that, definitely look up the Invisible Disabilities Association and their I Am Invisible No More campaign, because we are calling and begging for patients to speak out, because it is so important.
I agree. Now, in your relationship with your husband, I mean, obviously you were diagnosed before you met him. How is the dynamic in that relationship? I mean, do you try to keep a balance where, it's not always about the illness, and how do you create that balance?
It's an interesting relationship. In terms of, I mean, I was sick when I met my husband, and the funny thing is that, I met him, we had kind of a blind date. We met when we were 17, and I think I tried to hide my disease from him successfully for about 3 days. And at on date three, there was no hiding it. Like I was going to end up in the emergency room, and that was that. And so it's just been kind of a progressive learning experience for him on, he is someone who, he actually has a chronic illness himself, but it's very well managed. And so he was not familiar with someone who kind of had an unmanaged chronic illness. but he's been just kind of, since I was a teenager, he was a caregiver in training. And he's just become just such an excellent partner and supporter, and really someone that I look to help me make my important medical decisions. But at the same time, we still need to have a romantic relationship. We're somewhat newlyweds, and, we do try to get away from the realities of the disease. And, it's always kind of a challenge because it's we can get away, but I can never get away from my disease. So, it's a matter of combining support and, just trying to focus on the good things that we have going on and being there for each other in equal ways. A lot of things that, one issue that I know that patients in relationships with chronic illness really struggle with is that they feel kind of like they're an inadequate partner. I can't do all the things that he can do. Like, for instance, I can't walk the dog every single day and go grocery shopping and make dinner and work all day. He has to bear a lot of the literal physical brunt of our daily life. But I contribute in my own ways, and that's pretty much just in every marriage. You have to find the ways that you are going to be the champion in different areas. For me, I'm encouraging, and I help us with our career, business goals, and keeping different parts of the house in order that don't particularly mean hard labor, and just organizing our lives in different ways. So, you have to find a balance, and that's an ongoing learning experience.
Well, and I think that's important for people to understand. I mean, there's a few scenarios that can happen. As one, you're in a relationship and the chronic illness starts, and it changes the dynamic of the relationship that you have. And that's something that you have to talk about and maintain to try to bring, strength to the relationship. Or, a lot of people who are single when they're sick do tell me that they don't feel like they're going to find someone because they're sick. And I always try to tell them, the right person is going to be okay with who you are, because, whether the illness is now or later in life, it does happen to everybody. And, you do want someone that has that compassion for you with whatever is going on.
Yeah. And, and that was something that I really wanted to address too in the book was I have a lot of friends in their early 20s and 30s who are going through dating with chronic illness, which is just, as an overview, looks like the most challenging thing. And I joked about it and I laughed about it, and I talked to just a bunch of people about it, about like, well, how do you handle a Tinder profile with a chronic illness? What do you put on? Do you mention it on there? Is that a thing? Like, is that something you want to present? Like, is it fair to go on a first date and then not mention it until the third date, like I did? That I have a chronic disease, and that is a huge part of my life, and that it will have an impact on our lives. And so there was a lot of different schools of thoughts on that. But I think that the exciting thing and the really hopeful thing was that, we found that what happened was that chronic illness, like all adversity, does one of two things. It strengthens a relationship or it challenges it. And most patients found very quickly whether or not a relationship was going to work. And when they did find one that was accepting and understanding, it became immediately very, very strong and a very unique bond. And I have met and spoken with many patients who are in successful relationships, even very late in stages of chronic illness. So there is hope out there for those who are dating. It does happen. People do find happiness. And the book does address some of those specific questions on how to handle those awkward dating situations.
Well, I definitely love to hear that. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Ilana Jacqueline. We're discussing her book, Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
Take us on the go. It's even easier now. The Voice America Talk Radio Network has launched our mobile app for iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry. Visit the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market to download the app powered by Aircast. It's free and no registration is necessary. In minutes, you could be enjoying your favorite Voice America Talk Radio host, no matter where you are, in the car, out and about, while traveling, or anytime you can't be close to your computer. Catch up on the archives you've missed or discover new shows on the spot. Search Voice America at your favorite app store.
What causes us to be sick? We're not talking about the actual illness or the scientific cause of illnesses. We're talking about your body and health. Listen for the healing whisper of return to peace. Each week, host Dr. Marianne Chase shows you how to listen to your heart to identify poor health, stress, and disease. You'll learn how to heal energetically and spiritually, as well as physically. It's time to depend less on the drugs and more on the heart. The Healing Whisper airs live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Follow the Voice America Talk Radio Network on Twitter. We're at Voice America TRN. You'll get the latest fix on what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and general happenings that you should know about at the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Now you don't have to miss anything when you're away from your home or office. Just go to twitter.com/Voice America TRN or follow along with us at Voice America TRN, the Voice America Talk Radio Network. We're on the cutting edge of social media. Can you keep up?
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we're talking with Ilana Jacqueline, and we're discussing her book, Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness. Ilana, can you just tell us, it took you 19 years to get diagnosed, and you said it was a genetic illness, so you had it your whole life. What was your experience with the medical system before you got the diagnosis?
It was a disaster. I saw just so many specialists and had so many hospital visits, every test in the world done. And, I was playing hot potato. I was being tossed from one doctor to another, and one after the other was saying, I don't know what this is. It's definitely something, or maybe it's not something. Maybe you're just crazy. And, I knew that I wasn't. I knew that there was something going on. I just had so many infections that wouldn't go away. And by the time I was a senior in high school, it just kind of, a light came on. And I was applying for colleges, and I was just like, wow, I'm not going to be able to leave for college because I am not going to be able to take care of myself. What point is there to even applying to other schools outside of my hometown? And I realized if I don't get control of this, if I don't start advocating for myself on a whole different level, this is going to be it for me. I'm going to be sick my whole life and mismanaged my whole life. So, at this point, I come at all of my medical care as a partnership. It has to be a joint venture for me. I have to be both listened to and educated. I have to have, I have an end goal in mind, and I want to have the best possible quality of life every day. And that doesn't always mean the most aggressive treatment or getting on all the medications my medical team might think I need. Being your best advocate means being empowered about your medical choices, being educated, being really unafraid to ask hard questions and to get second opinions. A lot of patients feel like they're going to be penalized for saying to their doctor, that isn't good enough for me, or that isn't enough information for me to feel comfortable doing that. But you can't be afraid to hurt feelings or offend people because this is your body. It's the only one you have. And getting the best care isn't always just finding the highest rated doctor online and listening to whatever he says and then stopping. If you don't get better, it's finding the best doctor for you, who hears you, who's willing to work with you, and who's going to move you forward.
Well, I love that you're talking about being your own advocate. I think it's something that people don't ever think about until they're in that situation. And it still is very difficult because if you trust the system and it's failing you, which is what happened to me, what do you do? Because you're like, well, doctors say there's nothing wrong with me, so there must not be anything wrong with me. Maybe I am crazy. And it does affect you on that level, but you're also not getting the help you need no matter what it is that's going on with you, and a lot of time people come into me and they ask my advice and I say, you have to make the decision yourself, but you have to weigh the consequences of doing something or not doing it. You have to understand what that means. And I think a lot of people just want to be told what to do. So they find that a little discouraging, but really in a health journey, it is your decision because it is your body.
That's so true. And people really, wouldn't that be the best thing if you could just walk into a doctor's office and they could tell you what to do to cure your chronic illness? But unfortunately, that just almost never seems to be the case. And, patients nowadays, they have a lot of choices. And the first choice is whether or not they're going to do anything about it at all. Are you going to stand up for yourself and say, I'm not living the highest quality of life that I can, and I know it. I know there's something better for me out there. And you have the option now, too, to pursue different schools of thought in medicine. There are patients who exclusively deal with alternative therapies, and it works 100% for them. And there are others who don't. And I definitely went through the issue of doctors telling me, well, you're mentally ill, and that's what's causing all of your symptoms. And I thought, maybe that's true. It could be. Maybe all of this is psychosomatic, and I have, issues that I haven't dealt with. So I did the best thing for myself that I thought I could have. I went to therapy, and I went to multiple therapists and different kinds, and I had myself evaluated, in every which way I possibly could have. And all I kept coming back was with that this wasn't, a mental illness. This was a physical illness that was just completely out of control. And that really, that kind of gave me the extra confidence to be like, well, no, I've had this explored. I'm not hearing you. I'm not exploring that option. I did. And now I can tell you with confidence that that's not the problem either. So, you have to make a choice on, how far are you willing to go? Are you going to go that extra mile and check all your boxes, make sure that you're doing your due diligence so that they have no excuses but to give you the best possible help.
Well, and so when you must have come up to some doctors, especially in the beginning, that were resistant. That's what it sounds like. What advice do you have for people when there's a doctor that says, no, this isn't going on, or, off you go? What should people do?
It depends really on how far into that relationship you've gotten. I've had situations where I've had doctors who took 2 seconds, literally walked into the room, took a look at me, and was like, you're fine. Geneticists that have done that, that didn't do any tests. And I, in some situations I was like, you need to explore further. And others, it just didn't seem like it was worth fighting with that particular doctor because they didn't seem open to exploring. Really, the best chance of getting the best possible medical care is to find a doctor who is willing to sit down with you for longer than 2 seconds and explore your case. If they're not even going to open your file, then goodbye. Don't invest yourself and frustrate yourself with doctors who are not open to giving you quality care because that's what you deserve. So, it's a matter also of, you can't, in the best case scenario, you wouldn't rely on just trusting a doctor to fix you, but trusting instead in your ability to do your research, to communicate, to demand, and to co-produce your care, to do your due diligence when it comes to selecting a doctor and go the extra mile. And that involves things like making sure that you are as best prepared to present your case. And researching the doctor, look up their malpractice dues, look up their past patient experiences, get recommendations, come with a checklist of questions and test their communication skills and see how they respond to your needs.
Well, and one thing I know people tell me is that it's exhausting to do that, and I definitely can understand that. After you see maybe 14 people like I did, and you're treated the same way, it is difficult. But you have to, in my opinion, you have to keep looking because, you need somebody on your side. And even though the visits are exhausting, I used to just spread them out until I found a good doctor, So, and, I went once a month until I found someone, just because, I needed somebody who was compassionate and understood what I was going through. But, I did hit roadblocks all the time.
You do, and you'll get burnt out as well. That really is a reality of dealing with, trying to manage a chronic illness, is that you're going to have to see a lot of specialists and a lot of different doctors. They're not all going to listen to you, and it's emotionally and physically exhausting to do. So be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, and, take the time that you need and try and do the best that you can with the resources that you have.
So we're going to have to end the show, but is there any way that anybody can get a hold of you or your book if they want more information?
Of course. So my book is available on Amazon now, Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness. It's available for pre-order. It'll be in stores everywhere on March 1st. You can learn more about me and the book at chronicillnesssurvivor.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Ilana Jacqueline and on Instagram at Ilana_Jacqueline.
And can you just spell Ilana Jacqueline?
Sure. Ilana is Ilana. Jacqueline is Jacqueline.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. This was a very informative show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And I want to thank everybody for listening. Just be sure to make today a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive. Please join Dr. Rebecca Risk again next Monday at noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. We'll talk more next week.